Maybe if they ask for proof, I'll just show that. Okay, so because all of us are from software development background, we'll talk from the agile development perspective, because agile exactly does the same thing what MVP talks about. Okay, so uh, maybe if they want a video also to be on, so what I'll do is I'll make my video on for some time, so maybe some 3-4 minutes, and then I'll switch it off because it will consume a bandwidth sometime. So just share my video for some time. All right, so this is all about minimum viable product, what it is all about, and we'll just discuss in brief. So this is what is the agenda, and may last for some 40 minutes or so. So we'll try to see some basic concepts related to MVP, and maybe whenever you develop certain products in future, or you talk about software development in future, these points may help you in understanding certain aspects. Okay, so we'll see what an MVP is all about, what is minimum viable product basics, what are the components of MVP, what is the process of developing an MVP, and some real interesting case studies on MVP. So in the past, uh, maybe some companies have already used. Dropbox is one example, Amazon is another example, Spotify is another great example, which has used this concept of MVP. Okay, so we'll see those case studies which are related to your branch, and maybe we may learn something better from those case studies. So I personally like those case studies, how they actually evolve their MVP products. Okay, so let's start with again, this is not my own illustration. This is taken from a blog. The reference I will give you at the end. So the last slide will talk about, if you feel that this is interesting, uh, then maybe the last product you can actually go. Sorry, the last slide actually talks about. Okay, someone else. Okay, so if you feel that this is interesting, then last slide will talk about some of the resources which you can refer to, because I guess in your mini projects or during your courses you will learn something about the product development. I guess the Raj's groups is working on some product which is being developed. I guess even Shubham's group is working on some plugin. So all these are the products. So if you want to actually market it, maybe, or go ahead with those products, MVPs usually people refer to when they go for startups. Okay, so what is an MVP all about? So this is related to if you want to actually go into an entrepreneurship kind of a scenario where this MVPs can help you in developing certain aspects. So that's why I wanted to conduct this session. So IIC told me to conduct it for my own mini project groups, because you are anyways working on that product development. Okay, so let's start with the example. Again, I am telling you this is not my own example. I have taken it from a blog, which I'll tell you at the end from where you can refer it. A very nice illustration. Although it is very simplified version of MVP, you may feel that this is very simple version of MVP, but it will tell you what are the do's and don'ts when you go for MVP. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, so let's consider that there is a customer and wants to build a car. Okay, so you are an organization who are developing a car for uh, some customer. What you want. Now you might have heard of agile methodology. I guess the TE people, they have already learnt about software engineering. So in agile, you go for an incremental product development. Okay, so it's an iterative process. You release a version of a product. Based on the feedback, you again release another version, and so on. So it keeps on uh, iterating over a period of time, and it's an incremental process. Okay, so now imagine a scenario. You will see a lot of cartoons on this slide, but they really help you to understand what an MVP is all about. So that's why I have taken this example here. Okay, so uh, let's say you are developing a car. So you are in the car development business, and customer told you that I want to move from one place to another place. So I want to have some sort of a vehicle or some means to travel from one place to another place. Okay, so if you think about an iterative process, maybe if you wrongly interpret what an iteration is all about, this is an illustration which tells you the wrong interpretation of an iteration. So what maybe a development team thought of, so you can imagine this in the case of, you can parallelly visualize about your software development, what happens. Okay, so your customer actually talks about, you want to build a car or a model of the car so that the movement is possible. Okay, so this the development team at the end of first iteration delivers a wheel to the customer. Okay, so because nowadays you are aware that if you go for a waterfall kind of a development, the product will be delivered towards the end. Okay, so if you think that I will incorporate all the customer requirements and make a final product and then release, that by that time your customer's mindset might have already changed. Okay, so if that is going to happen, it will create lot of trouble in your development. So maybe the customer is not happy towards the end, and you may encounter in lot of cost and lot of investment again and again to rebuild the product or to add some of the features which you want. So that's the reason why agile is becoming very famous and still used in industry for a maybe considerably longer amount of time. So this kind of a product development uh, is usually preferred, but even in that, if you wrongly interpret what an iteration of the product is, you may land up in some trouble, and this is that example. Okay, so imagine a scenario in similar software fields which you will do. So we'll see this cartoon and some story like this and try to understand uh, how an MVP can be developed. Okay, so let's say that we are developing this product in iteration. So the first iteration is, say, a wheel which is given to the customer. Now the customer will tell you what I will do with that wheel. I can't move from one place to another place. How can I move over a wheel? Okay, so there is a problem which lies here. So I cannot go on the wheel from, say, place A to place B. So that is creating a problem in this scenario. Okay, even if you think that this is my first iteration, I should not deliver the entire car because the final aim is to make the car, but I cannot deliver it. At, so first iteration I'll just present the wheel, but customer is not having a feel of moving from one place to another. I cannot move on a wheel. Okay, so customer becomes angry. What product you have delivered? Okay, so what happens in the second iteration? Okay, so in the second iteration, I will have an axis joint with the two cars, with the two wheels, and I'll just present this. Okay, so even with this, the customer will face lot of difficulties to move ahead. Okay, so what happens in the third iteration? I will just make some model of the car. If you see, there is no steering wheel also to this car. Okay, so I'll just present this. Again, customer will face lot of difficulty. How the customer will move on this vehicle from one place to another place. So that will create another problem. And in the fourth iteration, I will finally deliver this car. Okay, with steering wheel and roof and lot of stuff which are happening here. Okay, but do you think then the customer will ask you, why don't you deliver this in the first place instead of delivering such uh, intermediate useless deliveries, maybe a wheel or two wheels joined together, or maybe a car's model without a steering wheel or so, or maybe without any accessories which are provided. So this is where you land up in some trouble. Okay, so even if this is an incremental development, you may see that this is an incremental development. First I will do some part of it, then I'll again develop a part to or add some part to it, and then maybe finally some product is developed. So you may feel that this is an incremental development, but this increment is wrongly interpreted by the customer. Okay, so there is a lesson which you can learn from this entire illustration. Now I'll tell you what that lesson is. So this is what the customer says: thanks, finally I got my product. Then but why didn't you deliver it as a first place instead of giving those useless deliveries in between? Obviously, so anyone can ask that, and this same thing can happen in software development. Okay, so we'll see the case studies at the end, but this can happen. If you deliver some useless products or some useless deliveries in between, your customer will get angry with you. So this has to be avoided. So Even if you think that you are doing an incremental development or an agile software methodology, this is a pitfall. Okay, so this has to be avoided. So the learning from this illustration, what we have learned, I hope you are all uh, with me on and understanding there is a fault in this design, whatever you have made. Okay, so the first thing is that in reality, the customer may not be happy. You may feel that the customer is happy, but in reality, even after delivering this car, the customer is not happy because there are a lot of changes which are already happening in the customer's mind. Even at the customer side, there are a lot of changes happening, and you are not incorporating. One thing which is missing in this is the feedback from where you will learn. We'll understand that with the second illustration. Okay, so a lot of time has passed without any actual user testing. Okay, because the user cannot test the wheels, or user cannot test a pair of wheels joined together, or even user cannot ride the car because there was no steering wheel or some other important aspect is missing from the car in the third iteration, if you recollect. So a lot of time has passed without any actual user testing. Okay, so when the user could test it towards this end, so only at the fourth iteration the user could test your product. Okay, so if that is happening with your software, it will land up in some trouble for your software. So a lot of time has passed without any actual user testing, and there can be lot of loss based on incorrect assumptions about customers requirements. So even that can happen. Okay, because you assume something, and since there is no customer side testing which is happening and there is no feedback which is given by the customer, you will develop the product based on your own assumption. But once the product is delivered, the customer will keep on complaining, oh, this is not working, this is not the way which I want. So there can be lot of loss based on incorrect assumptions about customers needs from your side, because there is lack of feedback loop which is present in every iteration. If you see the previous example, okay, so there is no concrete feedback which was given. So that was the flaw. So technically it might be incremental, as we have seen, and iterative delivery, because we are delivering the product in an iteration, but the absence of the actual feedback loop makes it very risky, and definitely this is not an agile. Okay, so this is one illustration which talks about how to develop a product. Okay, so now we will go to actual what is an MVP all about. So I hope you have understood this faulty example. Okay, so misinterpreted iteration or incremental model or delivery. And if your software lands up in such kind of a scenario, then there can be a trouble for your product in the end. So now let's see the other side of it. Okay, so this is second illustration, which will talk about again iterative and incremental product development, but the approach is different. And this approach is actually what making some startups very successful in the business. So then we will discuss what is the starting point of an MVP all about. Okay, so let's consider that the same task is given to some other development team which is also using agile or an iterative or incremental product development. Okay, so first thing what they will do is, instead of delivering just normal wheel, what the first team has done, this team has delivered a skateboard. If you see this, so a person can actually move from one place to another. What was the requirement or the original need of the customer? It was to move from one place to another place. Okay, so even if this team could not build the entire car, because nobody expects that entire car is built in the first iteration itself, but this is something which the customer can use. Okay, so there is a skateboard with two wheels. Okay, and the customer can move from one place to another place, at least short distance, and may give you some feedback. Okay, and that feedback is a learning for the entire team process. So that's what we are doing. So we're not trying to make customer happy at this point. Our main goal here is the point just to learn. Okay, so MVP is all about learning by delivering the products, and actual learning will take place when the feedback comes in. So you might have uh, maybe second year students who are there, they have not learned machine learning. There is something called as reinforcement learning, where the system learns from the feedback which is given. So feedback based learning mechanism. Okay, so something similar to that, the entire development team learns from the feedback which is given from the users. So we are still aiming to build a car, but meantime, please try this and give us a feedback. Okay, so that's what this team says. They are not just delivering a single wheel and telling that this is incremental model and uh, we want to build on top of it. They have actually given something which is usable, a customer can use and see and give some feedback. Okay, so this is what makes some startups very successful, and some who go for that wheel kind of a scenario for an iterative model may land up in some trouble later on. Okay, so this is what we want to learn from a business point of view also. So the first iteration itself makes a product something which is usable, customer can give feedback, and nobody, even the customer, will not expect that you build the entire car and give you in the first iteration. Okay, but the feedback is important from this. So what is the key learning point from the first iteration? The key question is, what is the cheapest and fastest way we can start learning? Okay, so this is what is important. What is the cheapest way? Because you don't have that much money to invest in. So what is the cheapest way and fastest way by which we can start learning the things? And if this question is answered appropriately, then that is a starting point for the success of that product. Okay, so the skateboard of your software is very important, the first iteration of it, and that is called as an MVP. That's what we are going to see, minimum viable product which the users can use and see. So there is a concept which is called as lean startup. I'll give you the links at the end. We are not discussing about lean startups, but there is a methodology called as a lean startup, which offers a great model based on listing your actual hypothesis about the users and then working systematically to validate or invalidate those hypotheses. So whether this product will give you what exactly you want, or it will not give you. So there is a hypothesis which is made, and lean startup, they actually work on the same model of an MVP. So they first release their MVP, and then if it gets started, if it attracts lot of probable customers, then they will go for higher iterations and then build a final product based on it. So there is a learning which takes place in every iteration of this model. So this is called as lean startup. Okay, so testing a prototype on even a single user will teach you more than nothing. So if you see the previous iteration, there was no testing, no customer will actually test on a single wheel. But even if some single user will test this, the skateboard which you have made, even the prototype, if in case of software methodology, you can even have some sample designs which are made, some prototypes made, or maybe even simple UI based application, just people can use it and see whether it works fine for their purpose. Then also it is a great start for your business. So testing a prototype on even a single user will teach you more than nothing. No one gives you any feedback. Okay, so let's go for the second iteration. Now what the customer demands. Okay, this skateboard is good. For example, I can move from one place to another, but there is a problem. The problem is that it is not stable, and because it is not stable, I fall off very easily. So that's what the customer tells to the client, to the development team. So now in the second iteration, that issue is fixed. So we will give some handle or something similar to that, similar to this to the customer, and then maybe the product becomes somewhat steady, and uh, there is no possibility of falling off very often. Okay, so this is the second iteration based on the feedback which is given, but still the product is usable. You can imagine in the second iteration, in the previous case, we just had delivered only two wheels connected by an axis. Okay, even that is a useless product or a useless delivery. But here we are actually learning what the customer wants steadily. Okay, so both the illustrations are incremental or agile kind of a development, but how that increment or the delivery takes place is important here. Okay, so kind of fun, and it does me to a coffee machine faster. So that this is what the client tells you. Okay, so I can move from one place to very short distance, say from my desk to my coffee machine in the company where I work, but it is unstable, so I fall off too easily. So we have rectified this with some handle or some kind of a mechanism where the customer is not falling off easily. Okay, so the customer is definitely happy at this stage. His biggest complaint is that it's hard to travel longer distances now. Okay, now there will be few customers who are happy here itself, and if they are happy with the skateboard, you with minimum investment, you are done with some maybe few customers will actually buy the skateboard also from you. Okay, so if they are happy, so with the minimum investment you have in the first iteration itself, some people are ready to buy your product. Some will be there who will actually demand you more requirements from that. So for them, you can go for higher iterations. Okay, so you have multiple issues involved and addressed at this in the same illustration. So the customer is definitely happy at this stage. His biggest complaint is that it's hard to travel longer distances now, like between buildings or due to small wheels and lack of brakes. Now the second iteration which we had is not having any brake mechanism. So once the customer goes, maybe he has to go very slowly, or maybe with his legs or something has to halt that particular device which is used. Okay, so the only thing is cannot travel longer distances, maybe between two buildings or in the same campus also, and the wheels are very small and there are no brakes. Okay, so this is what the customer demands, but he is happy at least can use for some shorter distances. So now the next iteration will be something like this: a bicycle. Okay, so the aim is to build a car, but we are delivering certain products which are intermediate, which are usable and gives you a more feedback from the customer side, and then you are learning from that. Okay, so maybe a bicycle, because now you understood that the customer wants to travel some shorter distances. Okay, that's what the customer's feedback is. So bicycle will suffice to move from one building to another building. So this is our third iteration, for example. So now you have brakes to the bicycle. Then we have certain two wheels and a seat where a customer can easily ride on, and then comfortably can travel from at least shorter distances. Okay, so the customer gives you feedback. For example, let's say the customer likes the feeling of fresh air on his face. Okay, because on bicycle riding, when you go for, you may get a fresh air feeling on the face. So that is what customer gives you a note, maybe in the form of feedback or so. Okay, so I like the feeling of fresh air when I ride from one place to another place. And the customer is on campus, and transportation is mostly about getting around between the buildings. So this product will suffice for that customer's need. Okay, so we learn certain things along the way, and these are those things which we'll learn. And who is teaching those things? The feedback which you get from the customer. So getting an appropriate feedback is an important aspect here. Okay, so points to think about: the bicycle may turn out to be a much better product than at least a skateboard. In many ways, you can now imagine or visualize these aspects, and the same concept you can apply on the software development aspects. That's why this cartoon or these kind of stories will actually tell you how to develop a product. But shouldn't we already have known that via some upfront analysis of the customer's context and needs? Even that is a good question to think about. Now, customer has already told you that has to move from one place to another place. So you may think that by doing some sort of domain analysis or some sort of upfront analysis about the customer's needs and customer's context, initially you go for a customer requirements gathering and analyzing those requirements. You may think that this is a common sense what you can actually think about, but the answer to this is really interesting. In reality, based on experiences of all the products which are being delivered in software or in hardware or in any kind of industry, no matter how much upfront analysis you do, how much you will do the upfront analysis, you will still you are still surprised when you put the first real release into the hands of the customer, and many of your assumptions turn out to be way different than what the customer needs. Okay, so that means you should not waste too much time in doing upfront analysis. It is not said that you should not do upfront analysis, but how much time you will invest, there is a restriction on that time. Okay, so we will keep that restriction on the upfront analysis because you require certain domain knowledge. It is not absolutely that will not require that kind of a knowledge, but there has to be a limit. on the upfront analysis. How much you will analyze the things? Because if you keep on analyzing, by the time you analyze and come up with some product, the customer's needs are already changing. Okay, so best approach is you do a little bit of upfront analysis and try releasing the product and learn from those releases. That's what this approach is doing in the second illustration. So the key point is do some upfront analysis, discover as much as you can before starting the development, but don't spend too much time on it and don't trust the analysis too much. Start prototyping. This is the key, or you can say the key mantra. Start prototyping and releasing instead. That's when the real learning happens. Okay, so you will learn better than the upfront analysis when you actually start prototyping and releasing, and that's what agile actually goes about. So scrums and whatever might have learned, or the second year people, they will learn in the third year or so. So this is where actually it matters. A lot of learning takes place here itself, and the product gets finer and finer in the subsequent iteration. Okay, so maybe again, this model works for both software and hardware projects. The only thing is, in hardware projects, the iterations may be longer than software because it requires somewhat bigger investment also from the hardware iteration. So maybe in software, you may have release cycles in some weeks' time. So maybe some 6 weeks or 8 weeks or so. But in hardware projects, it can be even in months. So maybe 4 months or 5 months or so. So even actual car companies like Toyota, Tesla, etc., do lot of prototyping of this sort. So they do a lot of sketches, 3D models, full scale clay models. They do a lot of such kind of models building first. Okay, so now the next thing what will happen is the customer will say that bicycle is okay, but when I want to go from one place to another place, I may require uh, I require a longer distance to travel, maybe between two cities or so. So then the bicycle, the next iteration will convert this to a bike. Okay, so even a braking mechanism is there. You have a comfortable ride, which is somewhat possible and can travel longer distances. Okay, so that issue which was raised by the customer is handled in this iteration. Okay, and this is what the final iteration is all about. So now the customer wants no, I want some comfortable ride where I want more people to join me in the ride from one place to another place, and somewhat stable, and may I require some bigger accessories than what bike is all about. So I may deliver this product. Okay, now if you have read these two illustrations, there is a difference between the first one and the second one. If you see the first one, I'll just go back to that slide. There is a small difference which is there. Okay, so if you see this slide, in the first iteration, I have a roof for this car. Okay, and here there is no roof to this car. Somewhere. Yeah, okay. So there is no roof to this car. Now, why is this so? Any reason for this? The reason is very simple. In the third iteration, the customer gave a feedback that he likes the fresh air on his face. Okay, so we have kept the roof open for this car, and this is what we have learned from the customer's feedback. Okay, so this is what is really important from the customer's point of view. Okay, and that's why we have changed the model which we did in the first iteration and kept the roof open. And this learning will take place only from the customer feedback, not from the upfront analysis of the feedback. Okay, so this is how the last iteration. So customer did get a car, but a better car than originally planned, because now he can also enjoy the fresh air coming on his face. Okay, which was not with the original planned design with a roof for this car. Okay, so this is just a simple illustration depicting what how an incremental development should be and should be taken in a right sense. Okay, so this is what we'll do it. So the incremental development should not be something like this, but it should be like this. Okay, so this is what in short the story tells about. And now we will go to some definition which is given
Sir,
by some of that. Yes.
a question.
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
Uh, uh, just 1 second.
I'll just because maybe some bandwidth can be consumed. Okay, start.
No, sir, no, sir. Yeah, hello.
Ah, yeah, ask me.
Sir, my question is actually that when we first make something or build something, we usually go for the patent or like the copyright claims for the particular idea or the project, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So here we started our project. So it was from like a skateboard, right?
Okay. Yes.
And we like go for the patent. It's like a new idea. Then we go for the patent and everything. And
Yes.
now we start taking feedbacks and start doing the changes. So
Yes.
ultimately, after like 4 or 5 iterations, you say that skateboard became a car. So
Yeah.
ultimately, you are just changing the product, right?
Yeah. You are iterating and
What you
refining
propose,
that product. That's it. Refining based
so
on
like
some
you
feedback which
adding
you'll get.
feature and function. So basically, the functionality of the project like changes, right?
Yeah, the
It's
functionalities
not the
keep on
same
changing.
project anymore. Then like the patent will work then or not?
The patent will still work, right? Because you might have designed the skateboard differently initially. The first
Yeah, but
iteration itself
like
can
the
lead to some patent,
functionality
right?
and everything changed, no? From design to function, everything changed.
Yeah. Yeah, but that skateboard is
So
still there, no? You have just modified that design. You
okay,
are
so
not
like
neglecting the skateboard, right? Maybe there are few customers who will go for a skateboard also because they just want a smaller distance. That's what I told if you recollect. So all those intermediate products, there will be few customers which are interested in only those requirements.
okay, so we
So
need
you
to
are
like
actually handling multiple customers' needs at the
okay,
same
so
time.
like we have to keep all versions of our project depending
Yes,
on the customers.
yes. You can even patent that also. There is no problem. Or you
Okay,
can get the feedback and patent the final product. Maybe your car with no roof,
yeah,
because
that's what I
that you
meant.
might have got based on the feedback, actual feedback. So that is a
Exactly.
complete workable product at the end. But before
Okay,
you
so
actually go for patenting, you may go for these experimentation first.
yeah, but if I go for the experimentation and someone else also gets the idea what I'm trying to
Yes,
do,
that
then
is
so
always there. That is always there. So that
so
may
it's like
happen even in first iteration. So somebody else might have already looked for the skateboard. So that has
so
to be very quick.
starting
So
from
the
the first product,
yeah,
I have to get patent for every variant of my
may
product.
not be every, but maybe few good milestones in the iteration which you get. You may think that this is somewhat different than you originally thought of, because maybe originally you might have thought of the car with a roof. Finally, you got a product with car without roof by for some reason. That's just one illustration. That's not complete software development or any product development how it looks like, but a very simplified way of understanding what an MVP is all about. So your
Okay,
MVP is basically that skateboard. So you can
okay,
even
I got
patent that skateboard, which is different.
it. Okay, sir, got it. Thank you.
All right. So I'll just go to. We'll just quickly move to some definitions, not extend more. I think this is not boring, but maybe you are learning something good. Okay. So yeah, one of the definition, Eric Ries, you can actually, if you get a chance to read this book, it's a really good book. Minimum Viable Product Guide by O'Reilly Publication by Eric Ries. This is on lean startups, but this is the definition what Eric Ries has given. A very well-known author. The minimum viable product is that version of a new product which allows a team to collect maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. That's what we have seen in the illustrations. So this is the definition of the MVP. So the skateboard which we have delivered in the first iteration is the MVP, which on based on which the in the subsequent iterations we have modified that product. Okay, this is another one. All these authors are really into the MVP and lean startups. Okay, so uh, this there is a book by Steve Blank, which is called Getting the MVP Right, and he has actually written this definition. So think about an MVP as a series of small experiments you are running in front of customers to elicit their responses about features, pricing, etc. And you are trying to use these MVPs to get learning. Okay, so an MVP is not a smaller version of your full product, like a wheel of your car. Okay, so MVP is not a smaller version of your full product. It's a completely usable product which you are giving to the customer. And this is by Ash Maurya, another good author. Practice Trumps Theory, Minimum Viable Product. This is a book written by Ash Maurya. A minimum viable product is the smallest thing you can build that delivers customer value, and as a bonus, capture some of that value back. Maybe in some intermediate iterations, whatever products you may develop, they may be suitable for some other industries or maybe some other customers. Okay, so you may start earning also. So as I told you, maybe some people like that skateboard. Okay, I just want a skateboard to move from my desk to my coffee machine, so I'll go back on that skateboard. Okay, so there will be few who are interested in investing in even though in the first iteration of your product. So you may capture some of the that value back during that learning phase also. Okay, so these are few definitions. Okay, so what can we learn from these definitions? One is our MVP is not just a stripped back version of our full product vision. Our MVP is a vehicle for learning something about our product or business model. So even in the process, you will learn better as an entrepreneur or maybe starting a business. So during that entire process, you will also learn something new. So it's a tool to learn MVP. And here there is a possibility of failure because you are doing an experimentation, and that's why we have said that when you do an MVP, by which way you can do that in a minimum cost investment with that. Okay, so cost is also considered in this aspect. So our MVP, but it is better to fail at the MVP stage than failing the entire product at the end. Okay, so our MVP must provide value to our users or to the customers, and we should be capturing value from the experiment, but it won't always be financial value. The value can be getting more insight about the product, by which you can maybe better your product in the subsequent iterations, and maybe the final product is really good. So it's not always from the financial aspect, but there are other learning aspects also, and we need to think about that. We need to learn what will create value and how we will deliver both into one coherent experience to the end user. So once you understand which assumptions are the riskiest ones you have made, you are ready to create a startup experiment to test this assumption. Okay, because if you look into the entire journey in the last two illustrations which we had, it's just an experimentation which we have performed. So once you understand which assumptions are the riskiest ones, that will come when uh, in the learning phase you will understand which are the riskiest assumptions which you have made about the customer's requirement. Maybe customer is not interested only in that particular requirement and you are still delivering it, so you can change the path in between because you are doing an experimentation and you are learning in that phase. So that's why it is called as a startup experimentation. You are just experimenting at the initial stage. So your experiment may be a prototype. So it can be a prototype, it can be an interview, it can be a landing page of your website, or it can be some other approach. We'll see some examples, very good examples shortly. So this is how you can. This is about a lean startup experiment example. Just a small example where uh, the requirement was there are so many voluntary events which take place, and you require some volunteers. So there was a requirement to create some portal where volunteers can register themselves and may get some notifications about some events happening, and they can give their services to those events if they want to do that. Okay, so this was some lean startup experiment, some small example. Okay, so the background was you need to test the assumption that people would sign up for volunteer activities if they could find something relevant to them, because not all people will do all types of activities or all types of events they want to volunteer for. So maybe few are interested in maybe something related to tree plantation or something, some other types of events. So not all people will go for all types of events. So that is why this is required. So you require to collect some profile of also from the user. So this was the background. So there is a need to assess what is important to them in this experience. Okay, so the hypothesis which you so based on that background you need to enter the result is you need to enter the data. So that means there should be some portal or some application which will give volunteers a chance to feed the data or create a profile. The hypothesis is your statement on expected outcome of that event is the formalized specific repeatable action what you'll get. So by creating an MVP where people can get tailored volunteer activities for their specific profile. Okay, so the suggestions of the events which you will get should be based on the profile which the users have already entered. So that can be a small MVP which you can create for the application or the website. We will get 10% click through rate to book onto the activity. So this is what is the assumption. So the assumption is if people get tailored events based on the profile, the click through rate on those events, the number of clicks which are happening for those particular event will be 10%. So we'll get 10% additional click through rate to book into the activity if you suggest the users uh, the events based on their profile. So this is what is the assumption. Now this can be true or this can be false. So maybe you will get more click through rate also more than 10%, or you may get less than 10%. But this is what is the assumption. And for this assumption or for this hypothesis, we need to conduct experiment whether this is true or not. So this can be validated or invalidated. If it is in both the cases, we are learning something. Okay, so if this is coming lesser than 10%, then also we are learning. If it is going more than 10%, then also we are learning. So we are learning that people like this product very well. So we can involve more functionalities also in this. Or if it is invalidated, that means the click-through rate is say less than 10%, the number of clicks which are happening, then that indicates that this model is not going to work. So, or you may need to get a feedback why this is not happening from the customer side, from the volunteers side. Okay, so these are some experimental details. How to conduct an experiment. So create a MVP, create a portal where a volunteer, say Abby, some name given to some volunteer who is looking online for some such kind of events. Okay, enable them to build a profile, enable them to get a tailored listing of events and activities, and allow them to book the activity immediately. Okay, so now after booking that those activities, next stage is the next experiment which is performed. Once this is done, you suggest some events, and if Abby, that user, clicks on maybe more than 10% of the suggested events, that indicates that there is some potential in this idea. So we are just experimenting the hypothesis. So this is some example, a small example. Uh, that's how you can actually start building a confidence in your idea or in your product. Okay, so these are some of the stages. First stage is the context. So we'll learn about this. What do you mean by customers context? Then jobs means what here? Jobs are not the normal jobs which we do. Then the interface of your product, interaction, what happens with your product, and feedback. So absolutely essential component is the feedback of the customers. So user context is where you will be using MVP with a particular focus on how they will be introduced to and engage with it. So that's the context. Now example in the previous case which we have seen. So let's say there is some volunteer Abby already signed up on the landing page. Now we will email her with opportunity to join some alpha trial and a link. Sometimes you may get those kind of links. So some new product is going to be released. You will get some link to test that product. So that's called as alpha release or alpha testing of those products. So you may tell Abby to use the product for some time and then give some feedback. So this is a mechanism where you can get some feedback of this product. So that's how you can capture the context of the user, what exactly the user wants from your product. Now these are user jobs where these are specific things they will do, read, interact with, buy or other kinds of jobs they need to get done. So in short, it's the content of your product, what exactly it's. So for example, in the previous case, it was building a profile. So create a mechanism or create an application where people can build a profile, receive tailored listings, book a place on one of the activities. So these are the things which the application or the product can do for the user based on the context of the user. So that is called as user job. So that's what I told you. They are not normal jobs which you look for. They are actually what your application does. Then comes the user interface. Now this is the medium by which you can deliver the content. And this is the way by which the customers can interact with your product. Okay, so It can be a simple web page or even an email or a print or a letter or something like that. So example, using a survey tool to get their profile details, then use an email to send them a tailored volunteer listing. So even if you could not build the entire web application, you can start your idea with this. Create a normal survey where you can collect the profile information and send an email to them. Okay, so that can also be your MVP. Instead of just building a web application, that can be a later stage. In the subsequent iterations, you can go for making a web application. But how to start an experiment with the cheapest uh, price which is involved. So just create a Google form or some kind of a survey tool, collect to build a profile details, and then manually send emails to them. Okay, so you will actually come to know how many people like the idea of tailored volunteer listing or something like that. And then maybe create a book now button or web link for bookings. So subsequently you can iterate over the product and make a better user interface for the customers. Yeah, customer interaction is the key actually. So can include things like user forums, emails, Twitters, and lot of other things which you can do interacting with the customer. If you want to conduct an interview, you can now conduct using Skype or any other such tool, or maybe chat or email some simple sample questionnaires. So that way you can start interaction with your potential customers. And this is really important, user feedback. This is the way in which you will gain the insight and learning you are trying to obtain. Now, this could include a wide variety of approaches from observation. So, not always that people will tell you the answer. You have to observe also how people use your product. So, observation is also one kind of a feedback which you will get. Interviews, analytics, surveys, and there are a lot of ways by which you can get the feedback of the customer. For example, there is a book now button on the website which you have made for tailored volunteer listing. So you can just give some rating scale, say 1 to 5 rating scale, and a face-to-face interview you can plan for it. So this is the overall model what we have thought of. So I'll just keep this slide, not extend it too much, but this is what is the gist of whatever we have learned. Okay, so this is a sample tailored volunteer listing example. So I'll just also keep it as it is because I want to go to the case studies faster. Now, benefits of MVP is it is less expensive as we have seen, because in the first iteration you are not investing a lot. You are just experimenting, so it's less expensive model uh, compared to just start building the final product. It is less risky because even if you fail, you will fail at the initial stage itself, or maybe in some 1 or 2 stages in between. So it is that way less risky than finally delivering, starting the end product. Quick release is possible, as we have seen. Releases are very quick. That's what happens in agile also, agile software development. Releases are very quick. Validation is possible by the customer's feedback, and sharper marketing messages can be corrected. So these are some of the characteristics of MVP. They are basic but useful. Feedback and iteration. This is very important feature of MVP. You get a lot of learning from the feedback. Soft launching is possible. Uh, Affordable and attractive pricing, because in the experimentation phase, the experiment you can afford because of very less cost involved, at least in the initial phases. By the time if you have gathered so many investors in your product, in the subsequent iterations, uh, that becomes somewhat affordable for your final product to launch. Okay, so now this will directly go to the case study, and then we'll wind up this session. uh, if you even search on internet, this case study will get on lot of pages of the Dropbox. I think you have already used Dropbox. Now every money making business starts as an idea in someone's mind. So Dropbox founder Drew Houston knew that the time and financial investment needed to build a prototype of his proposed solution to saving and sharing files would be exorbitant. So the idea was people should be in a position to share files, save files and share files like they do on their normal desktops or laptop machines. So that was the idea. Now his answer is making a simple joke filled video sharing, how the proposed product would work. Okay, so even he has not launched the entire Dropbox website. He has just launched a video of that website, and he has shown how the file sharing can take place on a local machine. So he targeted technology enthusiasts to, but if you see, there were a lot of, you can also find this video on the YouTube. Okay, I forgot to give the link here. Just give the link in the, if you want to, I'll just share this PPT also. You will, or even if you search on YouTube, you can find this video. Okay, so he had just given a video. So his MVP, minimum viable product, was a video which he has launched. Okay, and that video was showing how file sharing could take place. Even in that particular idea, there were, I guess, some 75,000 or so people interested in knowing about this product. Okay, so it targeted technology enthusiasts to gauge interest for this product. This is what he has shown. Okay, so this was a snapshot taken from that video. The entire video is available on YouTube. You can just go and watch this. You can see Dropbox MVP on YouTube. You will get the video for this. So he has just put up the video. So his minimum viable product is not actually website. His minimum viable product was a video which he has launched. So it can be as simple as that. So see the kind of investment which he had. There was hardly any investment, but there were people like say 75,000 in the first shot with overnight 75,000 were interested in this idea, and then he built that website, and then Dropbox got successful. So that was the case study of the Dropbox as an MVP. So the video exploded. Thousands of prospects visited their website. Their waiting list ballooning to 75k people overnight. That's what I told. And Ryu knew he had struck the gold. So today Dropbox is a $10 billion brand, thanks to a 4-minute demo video. So that was an MVP which was made. Okay, so not even a website, just a video which was launched was an MVP. Okay, another example, the app which I guess you may be using, Spotify. Uh, okay, so there was a time, this got I guess in 2006, when people actually wanted a streaming kind of an application, and streaming was not that powerful that time because of some bandwidth or network limitations and so Spotify spotted this idea, and this was their design which they made. Okay, so this was the original design which they made. This design is also available on internet, so you can see some buttons back, forward, and so. But their whole idea is to build a product which will stream seamlessly without any hassle. Okay, otherwise there will be a lot of streaming related issues which would take place. So their idea was to avoid that and seamless streaming. Okay, so that was their idea. So what they did, this was the design which they made, and the skateboard, the MVP for them is they have just collected some local music albums. So this was their original music album list on their hard disk, and they told they streamed it on one of the machines and told their friends and relatives and some family members to just view it, and they uh, uh, based on the feedback they actually rectified some of the designs and launched this product. So the skateboard or the MVP which I was talking about is just this, some set of songs or some albums on their hard disk streamed on some machine. That's it. Okay. Another example is Amazon. As you know, it started as an online bookstore. Now it has become a giant in the e-commerce field. Started as an online bookstore, and Jeff Bezos, who started out by buying books from distributors, so he used to actually buy the books from the distributor and ship them to the customers every time his online store received an order. So there was just one online portal. Uh, Whenever there is a request, he used to go buy the books from the distributor and ship them to the customers. And this was the MVP for them. Now it has reached to a greater height. The high book sales meant it meant sense to keep adding more products to the store. Okay, so if people like books, they may like other products also. So he kept on adding some more products to that, then acquire warehouses, then finally provide each user with a personalized experience on the website. Okay, so that's how an iterative development took place. But if you see, the first one was a usable product, the skateboard, buying of the books from the distributor and shipping them to the actual customer. Okay, so even if it's an iterative development, the first iteration also was a useful iteration. Zappos, this was also another case study. Now, to test his business idea, the founder, Nick Swinman, took photos of the shoes. Okay, so this is again a giant in the e-commerce field now. Started with selling of shoes. Uh, so what the founder did, took the photos of the shoes he found at the stores to see if anyone would be willing to purchase a pair without trying the shoes first. So that was the idea. So without actually trying the shoes, if someone is interested in buying, so this was an experiment which was conducted. So he took the photo and distributed that photo and checked whether someone is willing to buy. So that photo itself was acting as an MVP. So it can be as simple as that. And it turned out that the customers liked this model of working. And then Zappos also is now a multi-million dollar business. And the last example, Facebook. There are a lot of case studies which we'll get, but we'll wind up here. So Facebook, upon its release, Facebook was just a basic social media tool to connect with the friends. And this was in the Harvard University. The profiles were very basic as could be, and members were all students at Harvard University. So that was an MVP. And the student community very much liked Facebook in the Harvard University, and then got expanded. So the profiles were also very basic. People could just communicate over Facebook and create some simple profiles. That's it. And share photos. That's the only basic profile. So the idea proved popular enough to be worth expanding, and the platform gradually added more complex features and now become one of the giants in the social media domain. So these are few references. This is interesting. So Eric Ries, this if you get this book, a really good book to read at least. If you are fond of reading, this is a very good book to read. A Lean Startup by Eric Ries. You will get this by O'Reilly Publication. Okay, so I would prefer reading this first than to read the second one. This is a really nice book, The Lean Startup by Eric Rice. It will actually tell you what a lean startup is all about, how to build an MVP, how to conduct an experiment, lot of other stuff related to lean startup. This was the blog from where I took this the illustration. So he has also some of the blogs written on MVP and lean startup, Henrik Kimberg. So you can actually refer his blog. The address is also given, and these are some of the other links. Okay, so this is just an introductory session. I hope this was not at all boring to you, but you might have learned something from this session. Okay, so we'll stop here. If you want to ask anything, you can ask, or else we'll stop.
Sir,
Yeah.
releasing the idea as an advertisement,
Okay.
wouldn't it have a risk of this like your idea getting available in the market, like releasing your idea in the market before the application gets launched, like
So you
pre-advertisement
in the
of your product?
advertising.
Yeah, pre-advertisement of your product. It's won't it just release your idea before even the project is launched, so
Hmm.
your idea might get acquired by others, so they can use it.
Yeah, so there are lot of ways by which you can do nowadays. You can go for online advertising campaigns also, maybe at some lesser cost.
So like the idea you have, you just put it in the advertisement that like this kind of thing is about to be released
Yeah,
by us or something like this, and you
but
just
that has to
publish
be
it in the market.
supported by some basic prototype. That is what as an MVP is all about.
Where the
So
prototype
it's
is
just
once
not an
become like
idea, but the prototype also, because user should see that what is actually happening there.
so
As
without
you
the
can see
prototype,
from
it's
those
just
case
free
studies,
advertisement.
so it is just not an idea advertisement. It is about the product also, which you are doing.
Okay, so like you can't
Because
just
otherwise the people
pre-advertise.
will not get a feel, no, of what that product is
Yeah,
or how it actually may look like. May not be the final version of it, but how it looks like and what is the utility of that product. So for that, at least you require some prototype to be built. Because for example, let's say in case of Dropbox, if or maybe in case of Spotify, if you see that it's the idea is streamless streaming or seamless streaming of the music, but in the at the end, people should relate it to some utility, right? How exactly they are going to have a streamless streaming.
Okay, so in an advertisement, you have to basically show the functionality, like how the product
Yeah,
is about to
how
work,
the product is about to work.
and based
Otherwise,
on that, people
people will
can
not
decide.
relate. No, if you just put up the idea, see, if you put up in some words, common people who are actually going to use such kind of music player, they will not relate it. What do you mean by seamless streaming? So that will be very vague to many of the people. So if you actually tell them with some video or some sort of, that's where the advertisement comes into picture. So a sample video, that like what they did, they have not put anything on the server. They have just put stream that on the local machine, accessed it on some other platform. That's it. Not even the complete website or an application was built. But
Oh,
people started liking the idea by its utility. Otherwise, they will not understand no what's happening. So if they would have directly told to maybe, or somewhere on the blog or some social media or something like that, we are actually building a product which gives seamless streaming. Maybe some people might have understood who are from that background, but not all will understand. All your potential customers should understand what's exactly happening. So that's where this prototyping will help. So it is actually learning from the prototyping.
even the pre-advertisement requires the prototype. Like it's the bare minimum for the
Yeah,
advertisement.
at least the bare minimum. Otherwise, people will not relate. Even if you want, even say investors to invest in your product, they should understand what is happening. For them, at also you require to build a product,
Okay, and
a
one
bare
more
minimum
question.
product, and that is called MVP. That's why it is called MVP, minimum viable product, which the users can use.
And
May
one
not be
more
the
question.
final one, may not be the final one,
Yeah.
but at least a pre-release of that product.
Okay. And one more question, sir. Uh, you should like go for the with the like you have the prototype ready. Then what should you do? Like go for the like advertisement first, or go for the investors first?
If
What
your
is
prototype
more
is ready,
preferable? Yes.
you can actually, first thing is I guess investors, because finally you want to launch that final product, no?
And what if the investor asks like, how do we know your product is going to be a success or this?
So
What
that's
will be
where
the
those
response?
experiments results will come into picture. So for example, if you see the case study which we have seen, the Dropbox case study, they just released a video as an MVP, but there were 75,000 people overnight interested in that idea. That means there are potential customers who are ready to go ahead with this idea. So
Mhm.
so that is an backup experimentation results which you can show. So people
Just
are
a
really
minute.
interested in that idea.
Like a survey form or a video will do for that job, right?
Yeah, surveys, videos, interviews with potential customers. So that's what we have seen on those PPTs. These are the means by which you can collect the feedback, and feedback can act as, or if you present that feedback correctly in some presentable way, can involve more investors. So there are ways by which also you can collect the feedback. So that is a separate aspect altogether. So that will take another session to conduct how
Oh,
to conduct a feedback. But if you collect that feedback properly, I hope you have got the gist of what an MVP is all about. It is building a product iteratively, but make a product usable in the first iteration as a prototype and keep on learning in the subsequent iterations. And the investment involved in the initial iterations is very less. So to make a video and release, it will not take much time, or it will not take much investment also. That's what Dropbox did. Just a 4 minute video you can see on the YouTube also, it's available. It's just a 4 minute video, and there are potential customers who are interested in that idea. Overnight, as you see, 75,000 people were interested in that idea. So MVP can be as simple as that, and then he might have already started building an application refined that application and created a business model for it, and may got more investors interested. But if you directly approach investors, they will ask you about the data. What is the guarantee that people will like this idea also? So that's where this experimentation comes in. So now you have the statistical data ready with you before you actually approach someone for investing.
Yes, got it. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll stop here. I guess nobody else has any doubt. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, yeah. Ah,
Sir,
Raj, ask.
small question, sir. If Amazon is was there, so if Flipkart was let's assume that Flipkart is was starting a company, so
Okay.
their minimum viable product would be very much similar to the Amazon, right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
So how like how they will attract the users or the customers, because if I send the Flipkart minimum viable video or a product, it
It
will
will
be
be
very,
very much similar to what
yeah,
what
they will
that
say you are
Amazon
building
is.
the same thing.
Yes.
Yes, but
Yes. So
maybe the Flipkart distribution or the thing that will be after that is their strongest point will be delivery or something else.
yeah. So that they should focus on. So maybe delivery on time, or maybe delivery before time, or something like that. So
Hmm.
guaranteed delivery in this time period. So something should be novel in that approach. Otherwise, everything will be same. You take any
Yes.
of the e-commerce sites, that will be same only.
Yes.
I think even Shubham has raised hand. Okay, Shubham, okay, want to ask something?
Yes, sir. Sir, so MVP is just one model on which startups can be built, right?
It's the beginning of your experiment for startup.
Yes, sir. So
So
what are
MVP can
other
lead to a failure
models?
also. We have not seen any case study where it is failed. But
Uh-huh.
your first product can be a failure also, because you are doing an experiment, right? So
Yes,
for
understood.
example, if you see that example where a website was built for volunteering activities, and the assumption was, if you collect the users data, and if you give some tailored suggestions for the events, then the number of clicks on that particular event is 10%, for example, of the total customer base what you have. Now that can be a failure also. Maybe by that, if you find, maybe after the first version is released, you will find that, say, customers are not clicking, the 10% people are not clicking on it. It is, say, 2% or 3%. Then in that case, it's a failure, right, of that complete MVP which you have built. But
Yes, sir.
the
So what?
cost of
Uh,
failure is less in the first iteration.
so,
I
sir,
think
what
you are
are
understanding.
alternate methods on which we can start or begin? What are the other methods?
Because MVP is the, I guess, most suitable method to go ahead. Because if you build a final product, for example, you build an entire website, host it, launch it somewhere, and maybe then you realize, after it is completely live and launched, then you realize that it is not taking as much, maybe number of clicks on the events what you expected to do it. Then that time rectifying it will be very costly. Now you are at least understanding it at the first stage itself, that it is not going to work, or if it is not going to work, why it is not going to work. So that's where the learning takes place. So it's actually the method of learning and improving. Like, I hope it is clear.
Yes, I got it.
And that's why MVP is used in lean startups. Nowadays, you can read that Eric Ries book. If you get it, it's a really nice book to read. Really worth reading, actually. It's by O'Reilly publication. If you get any soft copy anywhere on some site where it is put, you can actually read it. There are few pirated sites. You can go for that. You can get some PDF or ebook version of that available, if it is available. But it's really nice book to read.
So can you put the name in the chat box?
Uh,
We'll go for it. Then.
or shall I share the PPT only? It is there, no, at the end of that
Yeah,
video.
that will be even better.
So I'll share the PPT on the group directly. At the end, you will get that link. Everything you will get. And if you want to refer this also, I just collected some material from where I've read about MVP. It's a really good concept to know about. So that's what I told in the beginning. This no slide contains my own material. Maybe in lectures, I may include my own material also, but this is just a compilation. But it is a good starting point to know about MVP and agile development and what should be right way of maybe introducing a product. So that's why that illustration I thought is really helpful, because we may think that it's an iterative process. So first, part by part development we will do. So first release some backend, maybe then release some functionality, then may release something else. But in that process, you may forget that the product which you are actually launching is not usable by the customer. So you are missing the feedback.
Do we have a separate WhatsApp group for this session?
I will just post put on the mini project group only. No?
Okay, okay, fine.
And if you
Thank you.
want to share, you are free to share with your classmates also. This PPT, you can just share it. No problem.
Okay, sir. Thank
If
you.
anyone else is also interested, they can also learn. There is no problem. If you want,
Okay.
I'll make the recording also available. I have just recorded it. I will share both the links, the PPT also and the recording also. So if anyone is interested, they can even watch this video also.
Yes, sir. You can
Free.
share on the.
Yeah, free to distribute. Anyone can use. No problem. All right. So I hope this was not boring, but I guess got some idea about what an MVP is. All right. So we'll stop.
Yes.
We'll stop it. Okay. Thank you for spending time and attending
Thank you,
this.
sir.
Thank
Okay.
you, sir. Bye, sir.
Just stop.
Thank